so I'm finally doing my birth story. This will be in a couple of parts. However, I went to my doctor's appointment on the 28th of April, just like your regular checkup appointment, you know, check your blood pressure, your weight, how you're doing, etc, etc. When I got there, my blood pressure was really high, and it had been high all week. So my doctor decided that I was going to be induced that day. So like that scared the life out of me. Like, you know, you go for the doctors and they're like, yeah, we're going to admit you to the hospital today. So pack your bags and get going. So literally I cried all the way home, and like I was in such a shock and such a panic, and I had to like board the dogs and get everything ready. And then we arrived at the hospital, I want to say around like 11 o'clock-ish, 11:30. So part 2 of my birth story, as I said, I arrived at the hospital around 11:30-ish, can't remember exactly. And we had to fill in like a bunch of paperwork, which like took forever because I didn't bother pre-registering. I forgot to say, at the doctor's, they did do a cervical check, and I was already 3 centimetres dilated. Bearing in mind, I was 37 weeks plus 1 day pregnant when I had him. So once we filled in the paperwork and everything, we went up to the room, the labour room, whatever you call it, and they started me, once they took all my blood work and etc, they started me on Pitocin. They started at 1, and then every 30 minutes they cranked it up by 2. So basically it took forever. I wasn't feeling any contractions, nothing. They did a cervical check again, and I was 5 centimetres and I still wasn't feeling anything. So I was going to go and have a nap, and then as I laid down to have a nap, part 3 of my birth story, I'm trying to make this quick as possible and not as many parts, but it takes me a while to remember what happened. So as I said, I was about to go down for a nap, and then as I laid down there was a pop, and my waters just broke, literally. It just like gushed out everywhere. And my husband even heard the pop, so like we got the nurses, and then that's when I started to have contractions, and I started to like feel, it was more like pressure rather than like cramping. It was just like pressure down below. So this is when I decided that I was going to have an epidural. I was like, I don't want to feel pain. So I decided on a walk-in epidural to begin with. So the epidural was literally fine. It went in my back, like didn't even feel it. The only thing, when they put the tube or whatever it is, I did get tingling down one side of my leg, but they said it was completely normal and it lasted like 2 seconds and it wasn't painful at all. So they administered the epidural. So part 4, they continued to crank up the epidural, and they checked my cervix again, and I was a 7, and I didn't think the epidural worked. I was in such bad pain. Like when the contractions started, I was literally in agony. So I was like, do you know what? I need to like switch this to a full epidural. So they did, and it was getting like it's the pressure that like hurt so bad. It was like, I don't know how to describe it. Like it wasn't cramping, it wasn't like periods like everyone tells you about. It was just pressure down below. Like my stomach didn't hurt at all. So anyway, I was a 7, and then I think like 30 minutes later I was an 8, and because I was in such bad pain still, they decided to start pushing, because I felt like I needed to push. I was like, I need to push. Like I can feel it. I can feel the baby basically. So that's when the nurse came in and started practice pushing, I guess. Part 5, because the epidural didn't work, like it took at the edge of it, but I was still feeling the contractions really bad. I started to like panic and didn't breathe, and then the baby's heart rate dropped to below 80, and like my husband said, like 10 people came rushing in, like telling me to stay calm, and because the baby's heart rate just kept dropping, because I was in like such a panic, I guess. So they had to put like, what do you call it, a heart rate monitor, whatever they put on the head to measure the baby's heart rate, and also a contraction monitor for me inside, because literally like they were like, you need to calm down. I just couldn't stay calm because it felt like I needed to poop. I don't know if that was too much information, but it literally felt like I just needed to poop. But obviously that's the baby like pushing down. So as they all rushed, so part 6, as they rushed in to check on the baby's heart rate, they gave me oxygen to try and like steady my breathing and calm down, which is easier said than done. But I managed to calm down, and the baby's heart rate went back up to normal. So everyone went back out, and it was just the doctor and a couple of nurses and midwives. So then they checked my cervix again, and I was at, I want to say they were saying it was between a 9 and 9.5, and then that's when I started pushing for real, and I could feel the contraction, so they didn't have to tell me when to push. Like normally with an epidural they have to tell you, but I could feel it, so I was like telling them when I needed to push each time. So I want to say I pushed for about, I think that they said altogether, like when I was pushing, I pushed for 55 minutes, which they said was really good for the first time. I just needed to get out of me. I was like, do you know what? Let's do this. Right, let's make this the last part, so let's go really quickly. So as the baby was crowning, I did feel it, the ring of fire. Like you do feel it, and it is such a burn, but because as soon as the baby comes out, it was like such a relief. I cannot describe the relief you feel when the baby comes out. And they laid it on my chest, and then I had an hour of him just like laying on my chest and everything. And I did suffer tearing, but only 1st degree tears. But as they went to like stitch me up, sew me up, like I felt the needle go through, like they didn't bother numbing. I was like, I can feel it, because they thought the epidural worked, but obviously it didn't. So they administered some numbing cream or numbing injection and then sewed it up, which wasn't bad at all. Like I was too mesmerized by little Eddie. So the only thing, his head was a little bit like a cone head when he came out, because he suffered quite trauma as he came out. And then also because they left the catheter in me, he came out with like a mark on his head, which like annoyed my husband.